program, the law grants you protections.
Yes.
And that is the incentive for the family, rather than to be at the mercy of the law, is to, in a sense, embrace the legal processes.
Yeah, that's the voluntary submission. Is the Section 549165 grants also that confidentiality. Because you're breaking a law, you asked for help, you volunteered yourself, you will be protected. That's why we usually file court orders. But there are some people who do not trust the court orders because you know, these are public records and it can be used against them. As far as I know, so far in our experience, we have not encountered this type of problems. Because we want the drug dependent to volunteer himself. By violating the law, by volunteering himself, he is sort of parang na-forgive na siya for seeking rehabilitation. And our law also provides for aftercare program for like 18 months to prevent, you know, relapse. Because addiction is a relapsing condition. Even if you have undergone rehab for like 6 months or 1 year, the brain remembers the pleasurable experience and the craving will always be there. That's why we always say in rehab, live one day at a time.
Okay. Now with that in mind, with the first step being the family getting together, coming to a consensus, and then starting to put someone in a controlled environment and starting the detoxification, we're going to come back, and when we return, we'll look at what happens to people as they embark on the road to rehabilitation and face the challenges of reintegrating themselves with society.
Books featured by The Explainer are available on shelves or on order at a different bookstore.
Now, still with us are our guests from DARE, and we're going to look at the long, hard road that rehabilitation requires. Now, Dito, we were looking at the first step, which was detoxification, just purging whatever poisons are in there and starting you in a controlled environment where you're not bombarded by all these different problems. But it's just the first in a pretty long road.
Yeah, the journey. The journey.
So perhaps maybe you can explain what the different steps are in the rehabilitation process, first of all.
There are 4 goals of rehabilitation. First is to achieve abstinence, meaning to say if he's abusing shabu, from the day 1 of his rehab, he shouldn't have any of those drugs. And we have to make sure that the rehab doesn't, you know, don't have, we call it contraband in the center. Then second, the removal of isolation. A drug addict lives in a matchbox. His world is so small already, and he is alone in his problem. He has to accept, he has to share that he has a problem to lessen the burden. And then number 3, you have removal of denial. He has to say, I need help. He has to ask for help. When he is in the therapeutic community, that's the first thing we want to hear from him, that he is sincere and that he is willing to be helped. And then number 4 is the basic training. The basic training is the routine of everyday life, waking up early, doing productive things, taking care of himself, taking a bath, hygiene, all of this is, you know,
basically
vitamins.
Learning to walk and cope.
Yes, have structure in life.
Just for the information of our readers, our viewers, there's a great book that many writers like myself really like, called On Writing by Stephen King. And a big portion of the book actually discusses his alcoholism and his use of drugs like cocaine. And all the steps that Claire was talking about are talked about in his book. So if you want a book that will help you learn how to write like a famous author, but also tells a gripping story, Stephen King's On Writing walks you through the rehabilitation process too.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it takes like the first 3 months in rehab, we want to hear that he really needs help every day. Because, you know, in rehab, they will be away from their families. And they will have the reason to say, I want to go home. I miss my family. I miss my girlfriend, you know. But we ask them, have you missed your family when you were on drugs? What is the first thing in your life when you were in drugs?
But
so it's a long...
Lito, part of this situation is also, as even as the individual person is sort of having to face reality and confront their own demons, you're also having to deal with the families who, of course, their hearts are breaking over what's happening to their loved one, that they're away from them, that they're being subjected to a regimen. As I think the operative word here is, it's really a case of tough love.
Yes, correct.
And this is something that most families are not prepared to cope with.
That is why part of the program is also rehabilitating per se the family, because eventually after the basic training, the loved one goes back to the family. Now, if the problem comes from the family also, unless I'd like to mention that drug addiction is really by choice. Really, it's not the fault of the family, but they could have been contributing to the problem. Now, the family members themselves, they come to our bi-weekly, bi-monthly meeting, and we evaluate, give them evaluation on how their loved ones are doing. Same time, we educate them on how to best deal with that particular problem of that particular loved one. So, without them knowing, they could have been contributing or enabling their addicted loved one to continue doing without really realizing that they're also partly causing the problem. So it is a holistic approach. The program not just rebuilds the life of the person in problem with a problem, but also the family. So before any recovery can begin, we have to rebuild the relationship. So that is really a big challenge. Number one, you're dealing with a person who is generally in complete denial that he needs help. Transform his personality, his character, into somebody who's going to submit and accept and have humility and say that I have a problem and I need help. Secondly is, I need the help of my family to support me. Not continue giving them pain or let's say, continuing false pride and saying that I don't need their help. So, little by little, the process includes the family. Kailangan kasi that they have to be, the relationship has to be rebuilt once again. Otherwise, if the loved one goes back to the same kind of problem, family problems with money, mistrust, and all that, all these other factors that
they could
added
just
to the
backslide and it might even come back even
because
worse.
what's the point of training the person and going back to the same problem? So even with the families themselves, they have to identify where the problem began or could have occurred.
You have a question?
Yes, Manolo.
Our audience has a question.
We have a question. Sarah, through text, is asking, but isn't it true that drug addicts who are brought in forcibly by their parents will relapse anyway?
Yeah.
Well, it's a relapsing condition, no? But it is also a choice, no? But there is a principle, one of the principles in treatment, in drug treatment, is that treatment doesn't have to be voluntary to be successful, or treatment doesn't have to be involuntary to be successful. So, meaning to say, whether voluntary or not, it's still the choice of that person to stay clean, a will to stay clean, a commitment to total recovery.
But does forcibly, let's say, doing an intervention and basically compelling someone to enter into rehab, does that make it tougher going from the beginning, or is this something that's already been factored in?
That's why I was saying meaning to say, a lot of people who were forced into treatment, a lot of them also end up okay. But those who harbor, negative feelings about the act of their own parents because of their own denial, that they do not acknowledge that they have already destroyed their lives. There should be one person to be doing that, and that's the parents. Coercion is also needed. He has to be some kind of pressure to motivate him. But some people cannot just forgive the act. So it's still a matter of choice.
We also have a question from our audience today from Kester Grant College. Norlene has a question for you.
Cute.
Good afternoon. I just want to ask, does your program